Welcome to the Marvelous Middle Age Podcast, where we are building a community of people who are in the midst of midlife, sharing our stories and learning from each other along the way. Each week, I'll have a guest join me to discuss a topic that impacts our lives and touches on some aspect of midlife. We'll discuss relationships, transitions, health and well-being, parenting, careers, and more. My goal is to encourage and support you and help you thrive as you navigate this adventure of midlife. Join me here each week for the Marvelous Middle Age Podcast. This week, Kathy Good, who serves as the Senior Director of the Chris and Suzy DeWolf Family Innovation Center for Aging and Dementia, is back on the podcast. If you haven't listened to the first episode in this series that was released last week, I would encourage you to go back and listen. In this episode, we discuss more about caregiving and share some statistics on caregiving and its impact on those who are providing care. According to the AARP, there are nearly 48 million family caregivers in the United States, and of those, 61% are working while juggling caregiving responsibilities. If you don't live in Eastern Iowa, the Chris and Suzy DeWolf Family Innovation Center for Aging and Dementia has many virtual resources you can utilize. So please see the links in the show notes for more information. I love that. Well, you know, we've been talking a lot about caregiving, and I think that some people might be listening and saying, well, I'm not a caregiver. I just, I go over to mom's house and help her, get dressed in the morning and then, but then I have to take her to her doctor's appointment over here. And then I'm checking in on her to make sure she's got her groceries for the week. And, and I had to take her over here for this appointment. And then we're doing this, but I'm not a caregiver, And I'd like to, I say, well, yes, you are a caregiver. And I don't think a lot of people realize that they don't know that they are in the throes of caregiving, even if it's early, even if the person is not going through any kind of health things, they still might be perfectly able to live, independently, right, and things like that. We go and mow, mom's lawn every weekend or whatever. There's caregiving elements in there that you're starting to do for someone who is in your life and they are aging. And caregiving impacts, studies have shown it does impact the health of the caregiver. There's stress there. I'm sure you see caregivers coming in, like you said, when they walk in for the first time, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm overwhelmed. And it does impact them. And one of the things I'm just so, and I know you are as well, just so passionate about is providing caregivers with that support and those resources in a way that they can easily digest them. So talk a little bit about who is a family caregiver and what are the things that can help someone, I think just realizing I'm a caregiver and I could benefit from some of these services.
So I don't know at what point we decided that we needed to define who is a family caregiver, because those of us who are so integrally involved, of course, knew. Mm-hmm. But then we recognized, people don't know. So we put together this flyer, and it says, are you helping someone by calling regularly to check in, providing companionship, buying groceries, cooking meals, setting up and giving medications, attending medical appointments, handling finances or other legal matters, cleaning, doing laundry, providing transportation, assisting with dressing, showering, or mobility, spending time handling crisis and arranging assistance, being responsible or on call 24/7, providing hours of unpaid assistance. If you answered yes to any of these questions, we call you a family caregiver.
Yes. Amen to all of that. Yeah. And again, I think that people they say, well, that's just what a good spouse or partner does. That's just what a good son or daughter does, right? And they don't acknowledge that I'm in this. And depending on what season of life they're in, they could also be still working full or part-time.
Absolutely.
They might still be caring for their own children, yet still at home, or early adult, children. Some recent stats on the CDC website, I think these are actually a little bit older, so I'm guessing they're even more they're higher now even, that according to research the CDC has done, that 40% of working adults are caregivers for an aging person. And that's staggering to me.
It is staggering.
That's staggering. And just depending on your age group, there are those of us, in this middle age,
right,
that have parents who are aging, or we have spouses that are aging and having, health things happening. But the statistic that really hit me hard was that 53% of those individuals indicate a decline in their own health.
Absolutely.
And that's where I know a place like the Innovation Center can help, because it can help them recognize, A, I am a caregiver, but two, B, I need help, and I need help so that I can, that saying, you can't pour from an empty cup. And I think the first thing when we're caring for someone else that goes is our own health and well-being. Those things fall way down on the list because you're consumed with the caregiving, and that's happening. And it's just staggering to me that the numbers are so high. And again, these are a few years old, so I'm sure these stats have even grown. So.
Yes, and I think it isn't unusual that for the caregiver to die before the person that they're caring for. Mm-hmm. I can't remember what the percentage is of that right now, but it's higher than you'd like to think. And I know in my own case, by the time that Dave went to live at Hallmar, I had been diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis and compromised vision in both of my eyes, all of which are stress-related conditions. And so somebody would say, well, how do you know that was directly related to caregiving? I want to go like, you want to live in my shoes and sort of see?
Yeah.
Yes.
Come on over. I'll show you.
And so one of the motivations, of course, for establishing the Caregiver Center and putting it together with the Center for Memory Health and all of these services that are available is to attempt to reduce the stress. And also for people that are living with chronic conditions because they have unmet needs too.
Of course.
And so, to try and keep people healthier. Yeah. And that's a big job because when you're trying to, especially spousal caregivers, I think that there's a statistic that says they spend 40 plus hours a week in caregiving if you're a spousal caregiver, and particularly if it's somebody that has some sort of a cognitive impairment, because then you lose the ability to be able to join with them in decision making. So all of the decision making then falls to the caregiver, the care partner, or the caregiver.
Right, right. And some of those decisions are big decisions, right? Yes. It's about financial things, living arrangements, other things that it's not just like, oh, are we going to get white bread or wheat bread? Right. It's, financially, are we, okay to do X, Y, and Z, or gosh, are we going to get some assistive devices or technology in our home so that we can age in place, or are we going to go, the decisions are big ones, and that is a huge stressor for people too. Yes.
Well, and you mentioned earlier, but for younger caregivers who are trying to help with their parents and trying to manage that, and also trying to manage their own family and maybe a job, they're really caught in the middle, and so the needs of adult children are clearly important that they be met too. And so by having some assistance from a family caregiver center, it might make the job easier. It will never be easy to be a family caregiver, or sometimes people are not even family. They're their next door neighbor, or a friend that they've had since they were in high school together, or so it doesn't have to be necessarily a blood relationship, but that job of caregiving will never be easy, but we're attempting to make it easier.
Exactly. I'm glad you brought that up, because I was looking at the AARP U.S. Workforce Report. This is very recent. This is just from May of 2024. And talking about, and to clarify, the caregivers we're talking about are unpaid caregivers. We're not talking about people that work for agencies that go into that in a professional capacities. These are friends, family members doing that act of caregiving. So, one of the statistics in that survey, and that survey always just astounds me, that working caregivers provide more than 21 hours of caregiving a week. I mean, that's a lot. And I'm sure that number probably is low, honestly, because it feels like it would be higher. It says that 67% of family caregivers report difficulty balancing care, giving responsibilities, and work. And they share that many of them have had to go to reduced hours or shifted from a full-time to a part-time job, which has financial implications for their families. And then some even have to stop working altogether.
Yes.
Because of the caregiving.
Yes.
Yeah.
And not only does it have immediate financial ramifications, but it also then affects retirement income because it affects your Social Security.
Absolutely.
And so it's very...
There's these ripples that just come out of that. Another statistic that really, I guess it didn't surprise me, but when I read it in black and white, it says adults age 65 plus are projected to surpass the population of children by 2030.
That's exactly right.
That's astounding to me. And I know earlier you were talking about Mercy, organizationally wondering, are we ready for this? Are we ready for the tsunami of caregiving, dementia-related services, and not alone just on the medical side of things, but just on the other side, the caregiving side of things. Are we ready for this? And I read that and I thought, oh my gosh.
Well, and I think that the stats say that every day, 10,000 baby boomers turn 65 every single day.
Wow.
And so in terms of what we know is that as you get older, you're susceptible to more chronic conditions, and clearly age is the biggest risk factor for dementia.
Yeah. The last stat I'm going to quote, and then I'll quit talking numbers because I'm not really a numbers person, but I feel like it's important for people to understand kind of the magnitude of this. And if you're an employer out there listening to this, small, mid, or large size company, or you're an employee, which many of you probably are in some capacity, in this latest AARP survey, it said 80%, and this is really high, 80% of the people surveyed agreed that their employers were more understanding of childcare issues than they are of adult caregiving issues, especially for those that have a child under 18. So these are people who are working, they have a child under the age of 18, they're caregiving for an aging person. Most of them, 80%, say their employers they don't have the resources and understanding and supports in place to support them in the caregiving of the aging person. And that's just, again, not surprising. I'm not surprised, but again, it's just like, what are we going to do? And it's an issue we need to address.
It is an issue, and it means that we need to do a lot more education about what the needs are, because I'm not sure that employers understand what the needs are when you're caring for somebody that is older and having some sort of chronic condition. And I think it goes back to, we don't even understand who is a caregiver, because you think, well, they're just the son or the daughter, and that's what we do as sons and daughters, right? Is we take care of our parents,
right?
That's just part of our culture,
right?
And yes, we do, but the strain of that, and given the complexities of our lives at both ends, whether you're caring for children or caring for adults, it's complex because we live in a more complex world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Kind of as a segue into that, you talk to those providing care all the time. Are there some common themes or issues that you feel like caregivers are facing that you're hearing them share a lot more about? We're going to cover some of these in future episodes here with Kathy, but what are some of the common themes you're hearing?
Well, I think that when I did my initial research, and then when we did a lot of customer discovery to determine what were the needs so that we could design services that would meet those needs, a big factor is loneliness and isolation, because the more you get into caregiving, first of all, the more it demands of you, but it also changes the structure of your life. And so you're not doing some of the things that you did before that might have created more sense of community and a lack of loneliness. And then I think the sense of feeling overwhelmed. and then not being able to sort of even identify your needs. So I think that that's tricky, because what you know is life is sort of like, blah. But then when somebody says, well, what do you need? You go like, well, I don't know, because I'm so overwhelmed, I can't even figure that out. And the other thing then is being able, as we mentioned earlier in this podcast, being able to find resources and then navigate systems, navigate the health system, navigate the legal system, navigate the housing situation, the housing system. I mean, there are all these systems that we exist in, but as you become then a caregiver, it's sort of like you're doing it not just for you, you're doing it for somebody else.
Yeah.
And those are all things that are kind of, I think, across the board issues for caregivers. And I think also then managing your own needs and feeling entitled to meet your needs when there are so many needs that you need of the person that you're caring for. And then figuring out how are you going to do that, and dealing with the emotional issues of guilt. I can remember the first time that I was going to go to the theater without Dave, and I couldn't even tell him I was going to the theater. I had to say, I have a meeting, so I'll be back later, because it was sort of like, am I really entitled to do something that we used to do together? And now I'm going to do it by myself, but I need to continue to be involved in life, because that's what puts gas back in my tank when so much gas is going out. So anyway, those are some of the common things, I think.
Absolutely. And thank you for sharing that story about going to the theater. I bet there are people listening to this episode right now that are probably nodding their heads, because feeling like how, as difficult or challenging as the situation is for me, how do I continue to find ways to fill my tank, right? To fill the needs that I have, to still enjoy things I want to do. And I don't want to paint a total picture of, gloom and doom about being a caregiver, because it isn't, but there are elements of it that are just hard. And so I think acknowledging that, I have this feeling about going to the theater. Am I allowed, to feel, to laugh and smile and do things I want to do? And the answer is yes, you are.
Yes.
But that's again, this is so complex and it's so layered, and caregivers, these are real things that they're dealing with. And I think, again, one amazing thing about the center, amongst a lot of other things, is that this is a place that you can engage with and come to and fill your tank back up and find other people. And then if you're listening to this and you don't live near where we are here in Eastern Iowa, we will find you links to other places. You mentioned Abe's in Nashville. I think you said it was Nashville. Yes. So we will put some links out there to other places, or where you can find other resources to find similar like places, because we're blessed to have the Innovation Center and the Family Caregiver Center here. I mean, this is just, I can't stress enough, if you're listening and you live within any Eastern Iowa, I would even say, I'm sure there's other places in other parts of the state too, but get here if you need to. Make a phone call. Right. Do a Zoom, I know you said some of the support groups have a Zoom option where you can remote in. Get connected, because it's good for you to do.
So basically, one of the upsides of COVID was the fact that we figured out that we could do all these things by Zoom.
Yes.
And so basically our center has no geographic boundaries. So if you live someplace else in Iowa, if you live in Lincoln, Nebraska, and you are listening to this podcast and you are a caregiver and you want to know some resources, you can give us a call, because we'll spend time on the phone with you or Zoom with you and help you figure out what might be available in Lincoln, Nebraska. And you can also Zoom in, because many of the support groups that we have here and our educational sessions are available by Zoom. So
that's great.
We have expanded.
We all are Zoom experts now after COVID. We all know how to work a Zoom call and get on there and make it happen. And again, that's, one of the silver linings there is that now we have ways to like you said, pull people into these things that don't maybe physically reside here, which is amazing.
Yes.
So that is great. Well, we are going to have a couple more episodes with Kathy. So we will have other episodes coming, talking more specifically about, some specific caregiver issues, whether it be communications, managing stress, caregiving from afar, caregiving with siblings, which is an interesting thing. So we'll have more resources coming, or more ideas and thoughts coming on some topics. In this series, we're also going to talk with a woman who's created something called a lifetime gift. I don't want to steal the thunder of that episode, so I won't, but it's another great resource. And then we're also going to have some caregivers share their stories. And Kathy, you have been so, again, gracious to share your story, to share with us about your amazing husband. And again, I will put a link in the show notes on how you can get a copy of Kathy's book, because it's great. I told her, I said, I couldn't put it down. I got about halfway through it and I had to stop because I had to go somewhere. And I'm like, I need to finish this. So that's my mission this week, is to finish the book, because it's beautifully written. And it just so articulately explains not just how the center came to be, but just how all of this has become such a life's mission and work for you. And I just love that. So thank you so much for being on.
Thank you.
It has been a joy. I think we could keep going, but we probably all have things to do. So we'll wrap it up for today. But thank you so much.
Thank you.
If you're enjoying the podcast, please follow the show to make sure the latest episode is on your podcast feed each week. I would greatly appreciate a rating and a 5-star review on the podcast platform you're listening on. It helps others to find the show. If there are topics you'd like me to discuss on the show, please email me at themarvelousmiddleagepodcast@gmail.com or direct message me on Instagram @Nicole Stute. Thank you for listening.